Hello guys, hello everybody. Back again for our next live stream, and today we have Blade. And what is the magic about Blade? Okay, I'll need to check here on the right side. I have the chat open, so later on the stream people also can ask some questions about Blade. And I'm gonna say hello in the chat. And we'll start doing my live stream about Blade. Well, what is the story behind Blade? By the way, the microphone is a bit louder compared to last week. Last week we had the live stream about Raw, and Raw has, of course, some very extreme hard sounds, and sometimes my voice was a bit hard to hear. So it's a bit louder. And what's the story about Blade? Well, the Blade idea for Blade came while jogging and while writing the book about synthesis. And in the writing of the book about synthesis, I did explain how a saw wave is built up using the harmonics, how a square wave is built up using the harmonics. And then I came up with the idea that it would be maybe an interesting idea to have a synthesizer which has a dynamic modulation of these harmonics. And of course, people know additive synthesis, which can analyze samples and that kind of stuff. But that was not the initial idea. The initial idea was to modulate the harmonics inside the oscillator and the waveform. So therefore, you see here this Harmalator. Therefore, I don't call it an oscillator, but I call it a Harmalator. And if you might know, I'm always about going into new directions. So Blade was pretty new at that time in terms of how to approach synthesis with additive waveforms. And of course, what was new was this XY pad. So this sound, of course, had many people memorize, in a kind of state of hypnotizing orbs inside the XY pad, and that was pretty new when I showed it at that time. And later on, this XY pad also appeared in Bluetooth, in RAW, in Predator 2, Sample Base 2. It's a controller. You can do a lot of cool things with it. Well, this is just one sound I just played by using Blade, but I think it's good to tell more about how Blade works, because Blade is very much a synthesizer which is different from anything out there. And I called it a bit of a trial and error synthesizer. So sometimes you get great stuff by just moving one parameter, and sometimes you run into nothing. So that's a bit different with, for instance, a Blade compared to a synthesizer like Predator 2, which is predictable in the end result. Well, somebody already asked, is there a Blade version 2 coming? No, that's currently not planned. That will happen, of course, someday. And then we get an overhaul of the user interface, and then we add some new ideas. We'll add some new functions inside the XY pad, for instance, because here you don't have some of the controls which Bluetooth, for instance, already has. So, now this Blade is also playing in the complete control keyboard. When I go down, you can see that we did have some parameters laid out, and you see a main volume in this page, the first page. You can see you can control the XY, but also the speed of the movement. So we also, for the ANCAS system, we made Blade compatible. And if you go, for instance, to the second page, we have the amp section where you control how the sound builds up in terms of volume, so the velocity control, but also attack. You can add a slow attack or have a fast attack. This one has pretty much a long release. I can now make it, of course, shorter. So there are a range of parameters which are laid out on this keyboard. So especially for people who are using ANCAS system, this is very nice. Of course, you need to start up complete control as instrument inside your music host program. Okay, now let's go back to how the system works with Blade, because when people are new to Blade, they say, okay, what is this? It's very different from anything they did see out there. So you have this Harmalator, and this Harmalator is the central position. And essentially here you make the waveform from its base setting. And this waveform here, this Harmalator waveform, is then changed by, for instance, the XY pad, velocity, LFO, the envelope. But let's explain a bit about this Harmalator. Of course, we have a manual. If you click on the help function, the manual pops up and it explains a lot also about the harmonics. You really should read it, and some pictures which show what the some parts do as well. But okay, now I start simply with a blank default preset, and you can hear a saw waveform. And if you go in this lower section, you have some buttons where you can select the Arpeggiator, some pitch modulation, general modulation, advanced panel, FX, 2 FX processors, and then you have spectrum display. And this one shows then the harmonics. So in this, what you see looks like a saw waveform and is essentially also a saw waveform. So when I open now the multiscope, which is inside Cubase, you can have then a display of the like an oscilloscope. So when I play it, you can see it looks the same like this here. It's a saw waveform. So now, if you have a neutral setting in this Harmalator, you have a saw wave. And the range, this one, determines how much harmonics you have. And of course, maybe you know that already. If you want to have a different waveform than for instance, a saw waveform, you can go inside Blade and go with this dial here to have a balance between odd and even harmonics. When I go to the right, I only have odd harmonics, and then it's a square waveform. So if you want to have a square waveform inside Blade, you go to the default setting and you only pick the odd harmonics. Then you get a square waveform. So these are controls which you have in here, and then there is also this other dial which is called timbre. And timbre, if you go fully to the right, it plays the timbres which you can select here, like a vocal timbre. So now, by this timbre fully to the right, I have the sound of this timbre, but I can go back with the slider, and then I mix it with the other harmonics. So I mix it now with the waveform, which is now a saw. So if I would have this now odd, you can hear, you can really manipulate the waveform. And the timbre is kind of preset harmonics which are then in which you can mix. So fully to the right, fully to the left, the timbre, you have the basic harmonics. If you go to the fully to the right, you have the timbre type. Okay, so odd and even we had, timbre, the range, how much harmonics you like to have. Then there is ripple, and ripple you can see down here. So the spectrum display is and when I open ripple, it ripples inside the waveform. And now it's a big ripple. So if I go with the ripple width to the right, you see that you have smaller ripples. So this is what ripple does to the waveform. So if I got a timbre now, then this ripple does what it does to the timbre. So this is ripple. It really ripples the waveform. And this is the ripple width. Okay, let's shut it down. I will go very fast to what it does. Then we have harmonics. And harmonics is increasing the harmonics. You hear the volume. And in the readout, which is up here. Up here there is the readout. You can see the harmonics go now 0.2.46 from the original part. So it shifts, it adds a bit of shifting. But you can increase that if you use shift. And if I use shift, it shifts much bigger range. So I do it again, the harmonics open it. As for sure, if you have a kind of timbre, this can be very interesting. I'll take another timbre. So these are all kind of controls you can use to manipulate the waveforms. And of course, this is not easy for making a sound, because yeah, you need to see how things work out. Symmetry is the same as symmetry in the regular. It's changing the width of the waveform, the symmetry. And if we would make a square waveform, it would be. Oh, sorry, this is the balance between them. Yeah, sorry. So that's not a standard symmetry, but it's the symmetry between the bass and the other ones. Okay, so then the bass, I didn't touch. The bass is of course fundamental, and I can change that. Now it sounds a bit like a bandpass filter, isn't it? But you see below in the waveform that the dominant waveform changes. Now all these parameters, so bass, range, symmetry, timbre, odd, even, ripple width, harmonics and harmonics volume, you see here also in the XY pad. And these dials, if you open these, the XY pad starts controlling these parameters. So if I change bass here, then I can have a dynamic display down here. And for instance, I could use for the vertical movement, I could say, okay, change for me odd or even. So these dials, bass, range, symmetry, timbre, even, odd, ripple, width, harm, volume, and then additionally we have also filter, Q, and volume. So with the vertical movement, you can use them to control with the XY these parameters. And the same parameters appear also on the left and the right side, and these are for the horizontal movement. And of course, you can use it in live mode, which I do now. Okay, and do some changes. And I can record this. Okay. And now you don't see the recording, but if you use the right mouse, you can see edit positions on. And then you can edit them. Of course, this is really what I told in the beginning. It's really trial and error. Somebody is asking, is it good for EDM? Now, well, this is a really different synthesizer. I think for basic EDM stuff, Raw or Predator 2 are more these synthesizers. This is far more experimental. I think people who are doing ambient kind of stuff, drum and bass, people who love wobbles, because it's pretty much easy to make a wobble here. You can use the XY for controlling the filter if it's active. Volume. You can loop this movement. You can do it here. Still change the sound here. You still have a sub-oscillator, by the way, so if you think it's a bit too thin for the low end, the sub-oscillator is here, also in the Harmalator. If you go to the left, you have a sinus waveform. Additional to it, and if you go to the right, you have a square waveform. Yeah, additionally, we added then also a distortion, so you can add here a first, for instance. Adding some edge. Then we have this filter here. Now it's a 12 dB low pass filter active. Now when I shut down this XY, you can do it by clicking on the label. It's again, this Harmalator is static. So the XY, by controlling it, really controls the Harmalator and makes it change. But there's more. If you go to the right side, we see, oh, there's also velocity, and velocity you also can address to bass, or symmetry of timbre, or even, you can see. So now the velocity changes, it's not so clear on this sound. Or you can say LFO, so that the LFO instead of the XY, you use the LFO to control the filter, or the even, timbre, range, ripple, put it off. So really the Harmalator is the center part, and the LFO can modulate the Harmalator and the filter, the velocity can modulate it, and here we have also an envelope, a traditional envelope, and down here you can see the destinations. So the center part, the Harmalator, can be modulated a lot, and of course it's as mentioned, it's pretty much a trial and error. So sometimes, let's go to another preset, say go here to the bank manager, the introduction bank. So you can go in many directions. Okay, sorry, the manager put it off here. So from this very mellow sound, by the way, what I want to tell you is, you see multiple orbs appearing. That's because the XY pad is polyphonic, so each note starts its own movement. Therefore, you see multiple dots moving, and it's arranged in this mode. So if I would pick here free mode, then the only would be one movement, which would be or, for instance, mono, and mono, each time when I hit a note, it starts to play again. One note. But if I want to have for each note which I play a movement, then I need to pick polyphonic. Well, this is one type of sound, but if I go a bit further, let's see. Well, let's see where this preset is. So this is totally different. And when you have a preset with Blade, the fun part, what you can do is simply by changing here the Harmalator basic settings. You can really easily change the sound. Or maybe you would like the sub-oscillator or without sub-oscillator. So really, it looks from the first sight maybe very complex, but if you would check this live stream, then you would understand a bit more how blade works. So it's pretty much also a matter of turning a few dials in the Harmalator, or for instance by shutting off some parts. So if you say, okay, I don't want to use this XY pad, you can shut it off here, and you see then still the LFO is active, and you use the LFO to change the parameters. So it's different, but still very versatile. Well, it has built in also an Arpeggiator. Of course, you can combine it all together. And you see here that the XY pad is a free mode, so it keeps on running and changes the parameters, and the synthesizer plays its notes. If I would have mono, you would see each time a note plays, it would start again. So the movement is not constant. So therefore, you need to have this free mode in the XY pad. Okay. Then we have, of course, the easy page. And the easy page is also a very cool feature. If you don't want to go deep in editing, you simply go to the next preset and just take one here. And this is a global amount. Or you change the harmolators in groups. So this is a kind of easy page. Okay. To add sound, you can easily change here the affix. It uses a tape delay and a chorus. You can put it on or off. You see the LFO is off. You can put it on and global amount, or an envelope, or the velocity. Filter you can change here. So the easy page, well, just give it a try. Go to the next preset and yeah, somebody says, yeah, compares a bit to Chameleon, and now they are inside Logic with it. I think it has a new name. Well, this is different. This is a different approach, of course, and maybe it's indeed an idea for Blade 2 that you also can analyze the movement of a sample and regenerate this. But it's a different approach. This is, I think, in some way a bit more experimental. But in some way, you also get totally different sounds with Blade, which are hard to achieve with any synth. I mean, this one is really very strange, but beautiful. And just by changing now the XY. Wow, this is now a nice preset, so I changed this sound. And if you like a preset, you made a new one, then it's of course very clever to go to the upper section, then you say save preset, and you save, okay, a nice pad move, I call it now. Then it saves it as a single preset on your computer. And of course, you can make your own bank, because Blade uses the classic bank system. Each bank can hold up to 128 presets. So I go here now to the bank manager. You can click that up here. I go to a blank bank, and program 1, you see all is empty. I press down here load, and then okay, I have a few presets here. I select them all together, and then they are inside this bank, and then I need to need to save the bank, of course. So then I press save, and then I say, for instance, 05 my sounds and press save. And you see here in the other, you can see then my sounds, that is then your bank. So now this. So that's really a bit different compared to what we do now with Spread to 2, Sub-boom Bass 2, is that each preset remains a single preset, but Blade still uses the original VST bank system. So you have single presets, which are inside the preset folder if you save a single preset, but you should make essentially a bank of your own, and this, how I just showed it, is the way to do it. Okay, so when I go back to the bank manager, yeah, the other thing what I did not mention in the Harmalator, okay, let's go back to the manager, to this blank bank again, to have a default preset, click back, again this silly saw waveform. But in this Harmalator part, there's also spread. And once you open spread, essentially this Harmalator becomes a multiple oscillator sound. And you can have it as a bass with 3 oscillators or 3 Harmalators or 2. With two Harmalators, it uses a bit less CPU. Then essentially you have 2 oscillators which are detuning. And with the spread type, 3 Harmalators, essentially 1 oscillator or Harmalator stays in the middle and the other 2 do spread up and down in pitch. So it really depends on the type of sound you're seeking. Of course, Blade is a bit older, so in that time we had to watch out a bit with the CPU usage. So we added this option that you can also have 3 Harmalator or 3 oscillators, or 2 Harmalators or 2 oscillators. Then the sub-oscillator has also a nice function. You can go sub-oscillator with 1 octave down, but also with other settings, with even +7 or +5. So some small details inside of it. Okay. Let's go back. So we talked about the Harmalator now, what we did. We used the XY pad to control the Harmalator parameters and the filter or the volume. We have velocity for controlling the Harmalators, LFO and envelope. And the amp section is of course for the main volume control. So if I go here to a preset, this is the preset we just made, and in the main amp I can control, of course, to make the sound shorter or even more spacey. Well, on the right menu there are some additional features, so you can make, okay, set to circle. Then it draws for you a circle, or you say make a spiral in, and the spiral in I can say 4 times. Of course, these movements can be MIDI time sync. You see now it's time, I can set it to 1 bar. Yeah, I'm just checking this chat. Somebody saying, yeah, well, I like the preset, but I have no idea how to sound design with Blade. Well, it's really important that you check this whole streaming, because I don't know how late you are joining in this discussion. But I mentioned from the start what you could do a bit and how it's built up. And this stream always will fall in the Blade folder. So we have YouTube, you have the playlist, you have a playlist about Blade, but there's a playlist about the live stream. And each week I will do a live stream and they once the live stream is ready, you can watch it afterwards. It takes sometimes a few minutes before it appears, but you always can look it back. And with Blade, it's very, it's not so easy to make a sound because it's for a big part trial and error. So when I go here to this preset, I don't know what it is. So you hear this preset and think, yeah, I want to change on that. Yeah. What you can do is then change the Harmalator settings, do some experiment here. Sometimes one change can make already a big difference. Change the timbre, pick another timbre here. Well, these are the parameters which are now changed, and the XY changes now the odd and even. By the way, if you click on the label, you can bypass it. That's a handy feature, so you can easily bypass what everything does. Of course, when I shut down the XY itself, you can hear how the movement works. I put it on now. So maybe it's handy that I put off the ones which are not active. So okay, I do this now very fast. So what it controls is essentially the odd and even, and this in the vertical movement, that's this one. The ripple a bit, and again here the odd and even also in this movement, and the filter. And the filter is a Vox filter, that's down here. So what you can do if you think, oh, this is nice, let me continue editing this preset. Well, take a different filter type. Let's see what happens. There's not much of a difference. Well, then we go back to the Harmalator. Maybe I should add a ripple to it. Makes it very soft. Oh, let's increase the range. Because this sound, pretty much, you see the range determines how many harmonics are on board. There are not many, and the more harmonics I add, the more it changes. So it's again, check the beginning of the live stream about the Harmalator and what the parameters do. And if you know that a bit, you simply need to tweak around. And sometimes things like making an envelope a bit different or adding a filter, that's sometimes already something which is very easy to do. So this is the sound. Then I think, okay, it's maybe a bit too thin. Yeah, what I could do is open the spread. Then it has a multiple oscillator sound. And maybe you think, okay, it should be a bit more spacey. Then the amp envelope is, of course, very important. Make a long release. And, of course, adding some FX. Now the phaser is active, but for making it a bit more spacey, nice stereo delay, you need to click on the FX2 label to put it on off. So it's really more with Blade that you, of course you can start from scratch, but it's, I think, more fun if you simply play around with the current preset, and then if you like it, save it. So as mentioned, it's not like a Predator, which is very predictable. You take a saw waveform, and by using A, B, C, and D, you have a brass sound. But with Blade, you run always in something different, something new. And that's the fun part of Blade. So it's hard to control and not predictable, but that makes that it sounds different than anything else. Okay, I have this sound, which is not bad. And by the way, that's a good thing. I did forget to mention, if you have Blade and maybe also some of our other synthesizers, you can combine that together in Prisma. Prisma you can request for free. So as you visit My Products, and then you go to My Products section, there you can get deal Prisma, and then you can download Prisma and install it. And in Prisma, you combine several synthesis together. So this is in superpads in Prisma. Okay, let's close Blade. Okay, here we have only Prisma. You see layer 1 is Blade, layer 2 is Bluetooth, and layer 3 is Predator 2. Maybe you don't have Predator 2 or not Bluetooth. It will still play, but will not play that particular layer. So when I shut down now Blue and Predator 2, you can hear the sound of Blade which is used. I can even open it, edit, see, this is the sound from Blade used. And this I combine with Bluetooth. And Bluetooth, let's play Bluetooth solo. It's kind of bad sound. And then there is also Predator 2 synth sound. And these together, I put them all now on, you get this combination sound. And the Prisma has the multi-control panel. Here you can do some changes to the sound. Slow attack. Or doing a faster attack. So Prisma is a free product where you can combine our instruments, and you really can make some very creative stuff, combine it together. And for instance, if you have this patch, when I click now on original, it loads again the original. In Prisma, it takes longer for loading a preset because it needs to load in the plugin. It's a bit comparable to loading a song, so it's quite some data needs to get in. But for instance, if you have this preset, you can go to Edit Blade and then say, okay, let's take, because you like this, but maybe you want to have a different preset. Then you pick a different preset inside Blade in, okay, let's take this one we had with the movement. It's the preset I just made. So now it uses this last preset I had, combined with Bluetooth and Predator. Of course, if you have this as a preset, you need to save it. And in this case, Prisma, you can save as a single preset. It was with files only. Okay, so let's see if somebody has a question. So I'm checking here the chat. Maybe I missed something. Not yet. Okay. Okay, let's go back down to Blade and tell a bit more what you find inside of it. So we discussed the XY pad and all the things you can use for modulating the Harmalator. But down here we also have the Arpeggiator. Let's see if we have some presets using the Arpeggiator. Mostly Jamal has some cool stuff. Let's see. So in the preset, you see we have tie, which lengths the step, tuning. Each step can have its own tuning, so it's also essentially a monophonic sequencer. Now you have the velocity setting, and I did show that also with Predator, the velocity keyboard dial. This one is very important. If this dial here, down here, is fully to the left, the velocity setting of the Arpeggiator controls the synthesizer. So I can have steps which have a harder velocity. When I turn this dial fully to the left, the velocity input from the keyboard determines. And I can mix between them. That's nice. You can have a combination of keyboard with the velocity. Well, the free row, you see here, most likely it's addressed somewhere. Let's see. Here is the modulation matrix where we have the source. For instance, you can have one source for controlling the Harmalator, but also a free modulation matrix. And you see here in mod 1, the ARP free row controls the decay, and the decay from the amplifier. Okay, let's double click the amount. You see every note is now as long. And now the amount goes negative, then the ARP free row controls the decay. Okay, I'm just checking the chat now. I will answer that in a second. So the Arpeggiator, it's not only for making Arpeggiator, but you also can use the free row to control parameters. Or let's say the free row, you also can say, in this case, it's control for the bass of the Harmalator, and I see different other things are addressed for it. And even the FX section can be controlled by for instance, the XY pad. Let's see. Source. I take the Y movement and destination. I take, for instance, the that's what from FX2, the speed. Well, let's see what happens. It's not so obvious. Let's take it under FX. Let's take reverb. Okay, the X movement controls then now the FX2 mix. Yeah, you can hear it a bit. Maybe I should down. So it controls a bit the reverb. It's not precise as I wanted to have, but you also can control the FX by using here a source. Also could be, for instance, let's say the modulation wheel here, so that I use the modulation wheel to add more reverb. So modulation closed. Modulation wheel open. So there are a lot of additional stuff which you can do down here. 2 FX processors which can be modulated. The advanced panel, there you can control, for instance, the shape, the envelope shape of the decay or the attack. Mostly I use -20, which is exponential, but you have the adjustment option. You can add warmth, which is the warmth is essentially the drifting from the analog synthesizers. You can add a bit to it. Yeah, then there's the modulation matrix where you can add 4 sources to a destinations, and with an additional LFO, additional envelope, and a general source which you can use to control, again, this Harmalator. Now, pitch, there is a pitch envelope for vibrato, and pitch envelope for pitch envelope thing. So it's very deep in the details. Somebody is asking if I ever thought about having a synthesizer with having different oscillators, left, right, which each own filters and envelope. Yeah, this is essentially Bluetooth. You have the option, and even in Predator 2, you also have the option to say oscillator 1 go to filter 1, oscillator 2 go to filter 2, and have different settings. So it's possible with Predator 2 and also with Bluetooth. And of course, once we have the plan somewhere in the future to make a Blade 2, most likely because CPU power is not as much of a problem anymore, is that we would have 2 Harmalators, so each could be independent. And then you could use also left-right panning for having them left-right panning, and each their own individual filter mode. And by the way, the filter has something very special, which I like you to show. Okay, well, let's take just a pet sound somewhere. So I go to a pet sound, and let's see. That's not really a pet sound, isn't it? Pet. Let's see if I can. Okay, mellow strings. Okay. Most likely it is already used in this patch, but we have down here the filter. You see the filter? But there is a little trick. Let me shut down the FX section, because that makes a lot of stereo stuff. Now we have without effects. Now, and down here you have a dial which is called separation. And separation, if I have it double click in the middle, it means that, because the filter is a stereo filter, it means that the left and right has the same cutoff frequency. With separation, I make it different, because once I go to the right, it means that the right filter has a bit more or higher cutoff frequency compared to the left one, and then you get the stereo feel. So I open it now. Can you hear the difference? I close the filter a bit more to show you better the difference. So this is the right side and left. So this is a very easy, very nice and easy to do thing to have a nice stereo sound. So double click, you can hear it's mono, and separation to the right, you hear that it is nice stereo. I can do it also the other way around, separation the other way. It's just how you want to have it, of course. I also can make it that one cutoff frequency is higher than the other one, or if I go with separation the other way around, it's the other way around. So, okay, so I do this again now. So really have a different left-right feel in this. No, then I add the ensemble FX for make it even more swirly, and the FX tape delay. This is pretty much a classic pet sound. You can make it very spacey. You can see no XY is used. Once I hit the XY, I can start having some movements. ripple. Okay, let's. By the way, a nice thing is you have also speed control, and I often use then the pitch band. Let's see, here's the pitch band, and to use the pitch band to control the speed of the XY. So speed control amount open, so it changes the speed of the movement here. Of course, I need to shut down the pitch band in the normal play mode. So here it's off. This is pitch band up and down. So now. And just like, so this filter has really some cool stereo feel to it. Give it a try yourself. And another thing I want to show you is that we have several play modes: polyphonic, monophonic, legato mode, and also the strumming or the chord mode. And the chord mode, okay, let's see if I have a different preset. Let's go to a different preset. Or maybe I can stay here. That's also no problem. Okay, shut down the XY. Now, chord, which means that essentially I can record the chord I play. So here it is, chord. It's off. When I do record, I always take the C3 as a root key and then play, for instance, a -7. I let go of the keyboard, and then instead of record, I push play now, and then one finger, it plays for me this -7 chord. You get some 70s, oh sorry, 90s dance sound. But there's also strumming, and strumming means that the notes are strummed like a guitar. Of course, if you use this chord and play mode, essentially if I hit one note, it plays for me the note. So don't be surprised that that uses more CPU, because simply you play a chord. Then the strum you also can sync. This is, by the way, also a feature which is inside Bluetooth as well, and also in Predator 2. And you can do some very nice things with it. Okay, let's see if I find a preset which is nice, which is use it. Not sure if this one maybe uses it. No. Of course, I need to scroll through the presets to find the right one. Well, it's not popping up. Maybe in the pad sounds. Let's see. Yeah, could be. It's not that much use, I can see. It's okay, let's do it with this sound again. I press record, I play a chord, strange chord, and let go, and press play, and then use strumming a bit. It's nice for some effect sounds, or release. So this is the chord memory, and the good thing is that it saves it within a preset. So if you have a nice sound, it saves it within a preset. I mean, in the early days when you had the analog machines in the 70s, 80s, you had also chord memory, but if you would shut down the power, it was gone. And this is now simply a part of the preset. So it's kind of harp sound, so let's do it with this harp. It's maybe a nice idea. I think it can record up to 8 notes. Let's see if that is the case. Sync. So yeah, it's such a deep synthesizer in terms of what you can do with it. And as mentioned, it's wise to read the manual a bit about what you can do, how the harmonics works. And I open it now. You see the thing about the harmonics in general. What we did now in this month, and also from today, we have a very special price offer, which means that blade is now currently €75, $75. I think that's a very nice price for such a deep synthesizer. It's of course not a synthesizer for everybody because it's harder to control, but you get a lot of cool presets, and maybe after watching this this live stream, you maybe think, okay, I get it a bit more, and I'm not so afraid anymore to do some editing. And again, the easy page is there. So if you have a nice sound, go to the easy page and just move the sliders around. And of course, it's for the wobbles, very nice. It even has a wobble bank, I think. Yeah, here it is. Using the LFO or the XY, so there's a lot of... Of course, I like more the experimental pad sounds which are inside of it, but that's of course personal. So in the synth sounds, there are some nice sounds. Tinkerbell. Moves up the harmonics. Okay, let's see if there's anybody having a question, because we have only a few minutes to go. At the end of the stream, could you explain why and when and why you started with the Papen project? Well, essentially, I'm not sure if I understand your question, but it was the case that I played in an electronic music band, and we made electronic music, and we had, of course, our own sounds. And at one day, I ran into the microwave, and I didn't like the factory patches, so I talked to the guys and made a signature sound card from our band at that day. And from there on, it all started. People loved the sounds, and then Emu came, and Sonic came. And of course, so I did the Access Virus, the first range of presets everywhere where you see RP at the end as initial. These were my presets in the Access Virus. And of course, when the computer became far more powerful, I thought, why not look for a partner which is a good programmer, and that I can create synthesizers with my own ideas, which you see here in front of me, which is Blade, which has different ideas from compared to other brands. So on my base as an artist, as a sound designer, I know a lot about synthesizers, of course, but I want to do my own creative stuff inside developing instruments. And the software synthesizers and the computer power is so great now these days that you can do really some cutting edge inside today's music producing and making some great virtual instruments. So that was initially is how I started out. I started out as an artist, sound designer, and synthesizer geek. Okay, maybe somebody else has a question. I don't think so. So yeah, well, this stream, check it again if you own Blue or if you own Blade. Check it again because yeah, there's a lot of information I spread forward, and there's much to learn about it. It's really a trial and error synthesizer, but maybe this live stream helps you a bit to do a bit more of your own stuff. And of course, you can enjoy a lot of the cool presets. And don't forget to also request Prisma, because in some of the Prisma presets, Blade is of course also used to combine Blade with the other synthesizers we have. Let's see, somebody is asking polyphonic aftertouch. Yeah, sure. I think the polyphonic aftertouch, not every keyboard has it. I had in the past a Ensoniq Acer 10, which had polyphonic aftertouch. And okay, let's see. Source, you have a modulation wheel / aftertouch. That's something I requested, so that you can combine the modulation wheel and aftertouch for doing, for instance, the vibrato stuff. Then I see here we have channel aftertouch and poly aftertouch. So for polyphonic aftertouch, you need to pick polyphonic aftertouch. So it's a source. It's possible. And then okay, I hope this, then we have the other controls here. Expression is, for instance, this slider here. You can use, which is on this complete keyboard. Then there are some free controls. And of course, you always can MIDI latch. So if you go to the right mouse menu, go over a dial, use the right mouse menu, and you can latch to MIDI. You turn the dial, and then it's MIDI latched. Oh yeah, the Hem S3 Turbo. Yeah, I know that. Very nice synthesizer, indeed. Yeah, it's a very good keyboard. Yes, I can recall that one. Great. I hope this answers your question a bit. Okay. Well, guys, thank you for watching again. Next week we'll have another live stream. And as mentioned, if you go to the playlist on the Rob Papen YouTube channel, you have a playlist called Live Stream, and you always can watch it again and check it out. Thank you for watching, and see you next week.